I guess a school has a responsibility to protect and serve every kid that they are charged with. But this poor little first grader,
He's in second now.
second
Yeah.
grader.
He needs to toughen up.
Welcome to Spedsplaining, where special education gets decoded one case at a time. I'm Stefan, a former classroom teacher and current instructional coach, and I'm joined by three brilliant minds in special education, Darcy, Anna, and Leanne. Each week, they take real stories, often from right here in Washington, and break them down into plain language. We use these stories as a launch pad to explore the wild, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating world of general and special education. Whether you're an educator, parent, advocate, or just curious about how the system really works, we've got you. Let's dive in.
Okay, this case involves a 7-year-old with autism and special transportation. Stefan, what do you know about special transportation?
Only what Miss Frizzle taught me. That was very special.
What's it? Okay, so
Nothing. Clearly nothing.
Yeah, clearly.
I don't even know what you mean by special transportation. Like, what? Give me some context around that.
Yeah, so under IDEA, transportation can be a related service on the IEP. So it's designed to support their access, like a student's access to educational programming by essentially saying and addressing that they have unique transportation needs due to their disability. So we will provide special transportation or busing or whatever that may look like in order for them to access their instruction.
Is it like special bus? It's probably yes, all the above, but scheduling, type of transportation, like if a student uses a wheelchair, they have to use like a certain bus, like with a lift to be able to get that. So they're making those accommodations for the kid. Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes we have kids that'll like come in a van, not on a bus, or like another school district vehicle for one reason or another. But yes, all of that.
Okay.
Right. Did I miss any piece of that, Darcy and Leanne?
It's just so critical for access. If you can't get there, you can't be provided your free and appropriate education.
Yeah. So it can be a related service on their IEP if their disability is creating that need for it. So not every kid on an IEP is going to require special transportation. But if they can't access their programming without that specialized transportation, then it has to be provided. Okay, so you determine the need for it on that individual basis with your IEP team. And then, like you said, yeah, Lyft. Sometimes it'll be like door-to-door service or not having. No, I'm just saying things you guys already know. Okay.
I assume I know nothing. That's kind of the whole thing we're doing here is I don't know anything. I guess actually maybe this is a question for later, but transportation isn't necessarily guaranteed by the school district, right? Like there's no legal requirement to provide transportation to school for general education students.
I don't think so. Not if if their programming doesn't require transportation, right?
Well, and I know this isn't Washington State, but it's like last year the Cincinnati school district cut busing, so all the parents had to drive their kids to school. What does that look like if the district isn't providing busing for any of their students? What does that look like for students with disabilities under IDEA? Like if nobody's getting transported to school, and then if nobody's getting transported to school by the school district, is the school district still required to provide transportation for students with disabilities?
That would be such a boundary question that would probably go to case law and be decided from there.
Okay.
Because each state, actually, it's not a federal mandate. So each state would have to make that decision on their own. But IDEA is a federal mandate saying that if they need it for access. So it kind of depends on how that would be interpreted.
Okay.
This RCW says the operation of each local school district's transportation is declared by their respective board of directors.
So it's district specific.
And state money is allocated to districts for transportation, but for activities, for student transportation activities, but need not to be spent by the local district in the same manner.
Okay. Just curious. It blew my mind, blew my ever loving mind. Like it was like last year that I realized, oh, busing isn't guaranteed. There's always, where I grew up, there were always buses around here. Just didn't realize that wasn't something that was just written into general education. So
this 7-year-old, he had been to daycare, really like stable, supportive environment for this kid all summer. So he's first grader. Younger brother also goes to this daycare. Staff had the experience of working with kids on the spectrum. They had used different modes of communication devices and PECs and all of those like special communication things. They also have lower staff to student ratios than the state standards are for daycares. They don't explicitly provide any specialized services or therapies, but say that they're like a welcoming daycare environment. So this student, prior to going to this daycare, had been expelled from 4 other daycare facilities because of behavior, including aggression towards others. They've also had home providers quit because of this student's behavior, so they say. And so this has been the only viable childcare option that family could find. And parents also say that like this daycare is really contributing to his social emotional development, which then indirectly supports succeeding in school because he's stable, loving, caring, right? Being able to generalize communication in all of these different environments. So all during preschool, so going back a couple of years now, during preschool, the district provided transportation between schools and in-district daycare providers. At that time, he had a car seat and harness, which isn't uncommon for preschool, I would say. And then at the end of kindergarten, he comes into this new daycare that's been a really good fit. However, this new daycare is on the north side of 7th Avenue in this town. So that's the district boundary is the south side of 7th Avenue. So this daycare is on the outside of the district boundaries. So when the parents enrolled in this new daycare, the district declined to extend transportation services there, saying that it's against policy to transport students outside of district boundaries unless it's required by their IEP. And the parents negotiated with the district about that, saying like, this is special, he really needs it. And so for the rest of that kindergarten year, they did do temporary transportation to this out of district bounds. Darcy shaking her head no. do you want to expand on that, Darcy?
Yeah, I'm just like, I kind of want to dig into Stefan's questions some more and look up some wax, but I can't do that and listen at the same time. But I think one thing schools sometimes do to get ourselves in trouble is we're just a little too nice. Like we're always going out of our way and breaking our own policies and guidance where that it comes to hurt us, I think, at the end. So I'm just like thinking ahead, like I said, yes, I would bus you out of district. And I don't know the rest of this case or how it turns out, but I'm like, no, you don't bus out of district.
It can also, you can feel really petty and crazy when you're like looking into where the student lives and where the boundaries are and getting like really map driven to decide if you have to provide the services or not. It feels kind of icky either way.
Yeah, and that's funny. When Darcy was shaking her head, I was like, oh, yeah, like I get where Darcy's going. And then you were on the opposite side of where I thought you were going to be. And I think this is my lack of experience in administration because so I'm picturing here's the street. And if this is the south side, is it literally just the opposite side of the street when they say north side? Or is it?
I mean, I don't have a map or like know the name of the daycare, but it's possible. But either way, like Darcy said, it's out of district bounds. Whether it's on the opposite side of the street or half a mile away, it's still outside of district bounds.
The implicate just the district side, thinking about the implications of that. And maybe they say you have to do it, and then all this is wrong anyways. But I can't get the cost reimbursed. The cost of the time, if there's any overtime or anything like that, all goes out of a general fund because there's no way to claim that from state or federal money, right? It's all written into how you do that. So as soon as it just becomes potentially, and if I do it for this student because it's the right thing to do, and it might be, I've now set precedents that I'm not going to follow our policies. And to me, that's where districts really get themselves in trouble, is to say, this is what we do every time, versus I totally get where Leanne's coming from. And it does feel petty to be like, sorry, they're just across the line, especially when this kid finally found a place that he can stay and is successful.
And then you get this, which is clearly a due process because it went poorly after you made that concession. So that's tough.
So this is going to make you guys have different, revalidate your feelings. First, they said, well, we'll only transport on early dismissal days because mom's having to miss work and we feel bad about that. So we'll just do it then. And then mom said, well, can you just do it all year? And then over summer, I'll find a different daycare. And so they were like, yeah, absolutely. We'll just finish out the year.
And then he goes to a different school, which is 8 miles down because he's not in kinder anymore.
So the district also said, like, well, this will help. And this was written in their documentation. It'll give him a chance to mature over the summer when we come back. So we just want to like keep everything as steady as possible right now. So in June of kindergarten year, they have the IEP meeting and then talked again about that being out of district placement. Remember, we aren't going to transport to this daycare next year. Parents report that the SPED teacher said that it would be fine to write in that we will be transporting for the rest of this year. And the SPED teacher denied saying that because the team did not agree that the services of his childcare were required to access or benefit from the special ed programming, so that they weren't going to write that into the IEP. Parent comes back to the school and says, you guys didn't put the out of district transportation for the rest of the year like we agreed on. And then over the summer, mom was meeting with SPED director multiple times to talk about it and really argue for continued out of district transportation. And the team met again in August before school started and sent a prior written notice refusing to initiate the out of district transportation. So then when school is starting, parents said that they've contacted over 30 daycare centers within district bounds, and none of them would take her child, whether it be for his disabilities, age, behavior, whatever, which as a parent, I can say is really hard. Like when we had our youngest, I talked to, I think it was like 17 or 18 placements and for a typically developing child with no challenging behaviors because he was an infant and could not yet talk to us now that he's 2.5, but like we could not find a place. We went with a friend of a friend of a friend. It was so hard. So I can totally empathize with the mom that has students with intensive needs and trying to find a place to still be able to keep your job. That's really challenging.
Yeah.
So the district said that they would work on training the Boys and Girls Club staff based on their partnership, which I thought was a really cool offering. I haven't heard of a district saying that before.
They're really going out of their way.
Yes, I would agree with you. The low staff to student ratio really concerned mom. It was 2 adults to 60 kids at the Boys and Girls Club. 60. I would say that's pretty average for Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, I guess a Boys and Girls Club. Yeah.
It's not average for a special ed classroom. We're about
that's what my thought was.
5 adults to 3 kids.
And the daycare that he's at now is 2 adults to 15. She says she's still unable to transport between school and home because of work. So family files for due process in October saying of 2nd grade now. So we've gone a whole year of kind of this battle saying that.
Were they busing him at the start of So from August to October, they did not bus him.
No, I don't think so.
And mom's probably just trying to make it work, like trying to just figure.
So mom says she missed 138 hours of work, and the student missed 35 school days that fall and 23 days the year before because of this lack of transportation.
Yeesh.
This is a really different transportation issue. It's like this student needs special transportation because of needing a special daycare placement more than because he needs lots of assistance on the bus, maybe.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't really go into the needs on the bus. So I don't know. But I just like jumping to conclusions, I would say that there probably are some needs, or he could have been trying to catch the closest stop that is right on the district boundaries, right?
The thing about special education transportation is they typically go to your home rather than meeting in a generalized location. So
which
it
wouldn't,
is a little bit.
and that wouldn't be an
door-to-door.
issue because their home would be in district boundaries, right? Yeah. The
Well,
issue
but
here is
they could pick up from a child care facility if it was special transportation.
right. It's just that it's out. This just happens to be on what I'm just assuming is the opposite side of the street. That's what I'm going.
That was kind of the picture I had in my mind too. It's like
But
right
yeah, I
across
mean, like-
the street, but he can't cross the street independently in district, or daycare is not licensed to transport. So
Right.
yeah. So they're requesting transportation to that daycare as part of the related services for him to access FAPE and reimbursement for the costs that incurred while arranging for alternative transportation. So what do you guys think happened?
Well, what was the due process about?
Trying to get that
Access
transportation
to
to
the
the
bus.
district.
And-
Just saying that they
recoup, right?
denied them, like.
Yeah,
denied them
like we
FAPE
should get
by not
this
providing the
special transportation. Yeah.
I think after listening to Darcy, I normally would have said, well, the ALJ is siding with the school because it's out of district boundaries. They're not required to do that. But the fact that the school set a precedent of we're going to bend the rules and make an exception maybe makes it muddier. I don't.
I wonder about that too. And I think there's so few situations where schools actually can just say, as hard as this is, it's not our responsibility, because schools have responsibility for everything. And I think when you get that, like one thing, you don't have to cross district lines. That's like about true in almost every situation. I just feel like I love that they were so accommodating to the family and they were working their very best and they came up with great ideas for the Boys and Girls Club. Like, I really feel like they're trying to maintain this relationship. They're trying to make this work. But just, I'm going to say that the ALJ says you don't have to cross your district line. Even though you did it, which was really nice. Hey, family, you should give them a thumbs up and keep working with them, but you don't have to do it. That's my guess. I could be wrong.
I think maybe they held the line on the decision just because it would be part of the handbook and the school policy, district policy, which is a little different than what we're used to in special ed, because FAPE is like this magical thing that, you know, you have to really dig into details to figure out. But boundaries are really black and white for judges, I would say.
Yeah, so that's a.
Oh, no.
sorry.
See now. Wow, I'm gonna cut that out, but I'm still gonna ask the question. Is there wiggle room? Because this is a student who has a history of having a tough time of finding placements. So is there wiggle room in a decision to be like, hey, this kid, in order to succeed in our school system, really needs this daycare? There seems to be a decent amount of evidence to support that. And so for him, I don't know, is there an avenue at all for a judge?
Can I Yeah, can I talk to you though about what happens on the backside of this as a school district
Please.
employee?
Yeah.
We may feel like there's wiggle room and we want to do what's best for the kid. The transportation department will straight up tell us no because
Oh.
it changes. It has this huge domino effect on all the kids' routes. The staffing is really difficult. There's no funding reimbursement, all of those pieces. Those conversations can be really difficult with the transportation director sometimes to make their world and special ed fit together.
Well, and as much as I don't like it, because this is not a super apt comparison, but here's my filter. At the beginning of the year, we have a 5-year-old is going to kinder, and his bus stop is just a ways down, like on either end. And last year they were dropping him off right in front of our house. It's like so easy for them to, and so we called, tried to get it shifted, went into the transportation department, and they were all very kind and very nice and gave me every avenue, but were very transparent with like, you can do all of this. I doubt it's going to make a difference. Like I doubt you're going to get this something to change. And we were frustrated a little bit because it seemed like a common sense thing. Like why couldn't you just stop, 150 to 200 feet here as opposed to before that? It's not that big of a deal. It's not going to change an entire route. And like stepping back from the situation, I see Darcy's point. Like you have to draw those lines somewhere because there's a lot more going on than, I don't know, but my bleeding heart doesn't like that very much,
I know that's the hard part. But I will say also, like, there are situations where we would bus across district lines. But I would also say that when I went to transportation to say, why can't a bus come down our dead end street? They came out and measured and said, our policy says 1 mile and you live 0.98. I'm like, well, what if they went out the back door? Right.
Much more black and white in that world.
Right. And so like those kind of pieces, but I think of like, if we had a student that had a special need and I could bring like from another district over and the buses could meet, I could potentially in the special ed world safety net that funding that I'm then going to pay the other district to finish the busing because our buses aren't going to cross that district line, right? And so without that, there's no way to recoup that funding or that cost. And transportation is by stop and by how many kids you pick up. That's why they'll drive right by your house and be like, there's my house, but they're not going to stop at everybody along the way, right? So for time purposes and for funding purposes, I think there's all those things that kind of play into that transportation, which is why I kind of feel like this one might be really black and white. And it's also so rare for anything to be black and white. I feel like a judge would be like, yay, this is an easy one, stamp.
Yeah, I think my issue with this is why I'm not and would never make a good administrator. I think my issue with this is kind of my same issue with standardized testing. Is like, what about schools is standardized? What about schools is black and white, and like you can draw these lines. And again, I fully recognize the need. I do. Like I'm hearing that and I recognize that's where it's at. And I recognize those hard conversations. I think it doesn't make it feel any better that this kid could just be negatively impacted because of money, because of a spreadsheet, because of some lines that were drawn on a map. That just feels.
Well, let me just.
Can you tell me how that feels again?
Yeah.
That's not going to play well on the mic. I have to cut that out.
It's really hard that we all are fighting for kids all the time, and then this address is just outside our border of being able to help you. It is really hard.
But if
we also don't know that it's just outside the border.
Yeah.
We don't, because usually I think the north-south thing is like Division Street, and then on the other side is north. So it's the same street, but it could be completely across town. Yeah. So.
Well, if you made all your decisions based off emotion and bleeding heart, like everyone would suffer. Like those exact same rules are in place to protect other kids and other things. And Leanne, I think you use the term as a domino effect, right? You don't just be like we have, and I guess just thinking about some of our other conversations is like some of those things that are put into place for school to be able to make decisions is because they can make decisions based off the entire system. Whereas me as a parent, I'm thinking about my one kid, and that is all that matters. It's not my job to think about all these other kids because I don't know them, and it's not my job to work within that system. And so I guess a school has a responsibility to protect and serve every kid that they are charged with. But this poor little first grader.
He's in second now.
Second grader.
Yeah. He needs to toughen up.
Okay, so the ALJ did rule in favor of the district, saying that, especially because they're making progress, that this specific childcare facility is not required for the student to receive FAPE. And like they essentially gave a kudos to the daycare, saying like, you guys are doing awesome with social emotional development, super beneficial, but that's not an educational necessity to come to school. And that the district did make a lot of reasonable efforts to collaborate with the family to help identify alternative placements, and that the absences were not caused by a failure of FAPE, but by not utilizing other transportation. And as a result, the parents were not entitled to any requested remedies.
I definitely agree that FAPE was not at issue here. But man, it's a bummer that daycare is such an impactful thing for our families. Like it's so challenging to find after school, before school. And then when your student has a disability, times 100.
And I think about like how much time mom missed. 138 hours of work. That's a lot of work. Even if you're using your sick time or whatever, just to get him to school, that is so hard.
I think just across the board, that is how much having a child with a disability impacts your livelihood. And depending on the severity of it, a kid who comes home a lot, a medically fragile child that you can't even find a daycare for, even if it's outside of that. I mean, I just think that we as a society have not done a good job of fostering the family. And there's got to be another system besides schools that are helping with that.
Are there others, like currently?
Other like programs and things like that?
Support families and...
Like in general or with transportation? That's a really big question.
Well, I was like with Darcy, she said there needs to be other systems in place that support families of students with disabilities. And like all I can think about this family, like you mentioned mom a lot, so I'm not sure if it's a 2-parent household. And so, and it sounds like maybe they don't have family in town to be able to rely on. Like that's such a huge asset. And so we start thinking of all these privileges or assets that families have in their community, and schools provide a bridge for a lot of those things. And so like if you have a working single parent with no family around, like yeah, there do need to be other systems in place to support this family, to give this kid every possible opportunity. So my question is, are there other resources in communities that you know of that support someone in that situation?
So DDS and DSHS are both options for families to seek help. They offer things like respite care, additional funding if you need to pay somebody to come in for after school care. But I would not say, from what I've seen, and I've never worked in that system, but from what I've seen from families, is it's far from robust enough where if I was a single mom and needed that pay for the 138 hours, that I would be able to maintain employment and gainful employment and keep my kid in school.
Yeah, and there are like gas vouchers you can get, and like people to people that'll help for medical appointments. But there's still some barriers in accessing that, and that wouldn't be a school, wouldn't help with getting to school.
And it comes back to this whole FAPE depends on your zip code, because in some places there's going to be a lot of resources to help this family, and other places there are hardly any resources. And I definitely have empathy for this mom, because working at all when you have a student like that, that needs that level of care, almost doesn't even make sense. Doesn't even cover your costs. And now the student has to switch schools. Is that what you're telling us? Or switch daycares?
I don't know. I don't know what they decided to do after the case was over. One of those.
Well, and remember, if they wanted to switch schools, that's a student choice.
That's true.
And so the family now has to go through that process to get them into a different district, because they no longer have an obligation to education in that district.
It's tough for me that it's choice when that's where your daycare is, but I know it is. It's based on where you sleep at night.
Man, Anna, at what age would we be okay with walking a mile to school?
A mile? That kid is so lazy.
I know. It would it'd take him like 6 hours to get there.
My kids started in kinder.
Walking a mile?
Yeah.
Did you walk with them?
No.
At 5?
Alaska.
Wow.
No, we were
Alaska.
here.
Where was their bus stop?
At the end by the state patrol.
Dang.
Right at that.
This is what happens when you have girls. It just, no, my kids would have squirreled and found they would be in a different zip code by the time they got there. No, I'm kidding. Could have done it for sure. He was very responsible, but
they would wait until the last minute in winter, and they would walk to the dead end and then run across the mud pit to get to the other side. So they didn't have to walk all the way around.
That's just
really
creative problem solving. See,
yeah,
I can see being more likely to trust at 5 than at 8.
Yeah.
Depends on the kid for sure.
Yeah, that's wild.
Okay, even when we're walking with him, wanders into the middle of the street because we don't have sidewalks or anything.
It's gotten better.
Even thinking about that, think of how impactful that is to your home.
Yeah.
Right? Like either someone has to walk them, someone has to drop them off at the bus. You can't leave for work until then. You can't be on a Zoom if you're waiting for the bus out down the way, right? I mean, that's impactful just to your family with no hardships.
Yeah. Well, and it's Anna 100% of the time making the connections and finding childcare, and the amount of work that's put into that is there someone in the community that can help us? Do we have a neighbor? Because we don't have family in town. And so if you're not, is it Ruby Payne? Is that book, Culture of Poverty? Is that I know that's like pretty old at this point, but I always like think back to that when it comes to those, like thinking about poverty as around more than just financial resources. If you don't have a strong network, community, family members to bail you out, just talking to my mom this morning, she's like scheduling a trip to come out here at the end of March. And one of the first things she asked was, is there a time that's more convenient where me coming out there would bridge a gap for you and Anna for travel or school's out? Or that's the first thing on her mind, because that's typically when we're like leaning on Anna's parents to drive over or my parents to come out or, I don't know. It's just like, the first thing that we do when we're like, oh my gosh, we're both going to be home late, we're both traveling, we're calling on friends or trying to find different daycares, and that is stressful, but like we have a decent amount of means and flexibility to make that work. When you're talking about a potentially single parent with a student with a disability who's been kicked out of a bunch of different places, that is like, what do you even do? What do? You have to have a social safety net to support that person.
Most parents end up not being able to work.
And then it is a cycle of poverty.
Well, this is just ending on such a high
note. Anna, tell us our one takeaway.
I think that like transportation is a really critical conversation that can really get swept under the rug. It does require conversation and connection with SPED and transportation and family to really balance what those needs are and what the limitations of services are. And it is often a black and white answer, but it doesn't always feel like it should be. Thanks for tuning into Spedsplaining. If you have questions or thoughts about today's episode, we would love to hear from you. Head over to our links in the show notes where you can drop your questions, join the conversations, and connect with us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode if you found it helpful. Until next time, keep learning.